the whispering waves. The ocean had always held a peculiar fascination for Captain Elijah Graves. For a man who had spent his life at sea, there was a certain comfort in its unpredictability. Yet nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to face. One chilly autumn morning, Elijah received a call that would change his life. It was from Isaac Thatcher, a maritime historian and an old friend. Isaac had discovered a cryptic map in a dusty bookstore, suggesting the location of the Luna Maris, an infamous ship that vanished over a century ago. The Luna Maris was a legend, a luxury liner that disappeared during a routine voyage, taking all its passengers with it. Rumors of its fate grew sinister over the years, with some believing it still drifted in the North Atlantic, crewed by the souls of the damned. Isaac's discovery reignited his passion for the unknown. Elijah, this could be the greatest discovery of our time. We have to find that ship. Despite his reservations, Elijah was drawn to the adventure. They assembled a small crew. Sarah, a marine biologist with a penchant for the supernatural. Marcus, a burly deckhand. And Isaac, whose knowledge of maritime history would be invaluable. Days later, under a leaden sky, their vessel, the Resolute, set sail. As they ventured farther from shore, the weather grew foul. The ocean transformed into a tempestuous beast, waves crashing against the hull with malevolent force. The crew felt tension in the air, a weight pressing down as they neared the coordinates on Isaac's map. As night fell, the storm reached its zenith. Lightning split the sky, each flash revealing dark, churning waves. It was then, in the heart of the storm, that they saw it, a ghostly silhouette on the horizon, barely visible through the veil of rain and mist. "There she is," Isaac whispered, a mix of awe and terror in his voice. The Luna Maris loomed ahead, an enormous vessel pulsing with malevolent energy. The ship's masts were skeletal, its sails tattered. The wooden hull, rotting and covered in seaweed, seemed submerged for centuries. But most unsettling was the silence. Despite the storm raging around them, the ship was eerily quiet. Elijah, gripping the wheel, steered the Resolute closer. The storm's fury abated, replaced by an unnatural calm. The sea, once a seething mass, grew still. The fog thickened, wrapping around them like a shroud, and the air grew cold, so cold that their breath became visible. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "This doesn't feel right," Sarah muttered. Elijah nodded, but his determination hadn't wavered. "Prepare to board," he commanded. The first step onto the deck of the Luna Maris felt like stepping into another world. The air was thick with an oily fog, distorting vision and muffling sound. The wood beneath their feet creaked ominously, as if protesting their presence. The ship seemed to breathe, its timbers groaning in response. "Stay close," Elijah ordered. The crew moved as a unit, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The deck was littered with remnants of a time-long past, broken crates, rusted chains, and decaying decorations. The ship was a time capsule, frozen in the moment of its doom. They made their way to the captain's quarters, where the Luna Maris' former glory was most evident. The room was large and opulent, with intricately carved furniture now marred by age. An ornate mirror hung on the far wall, its surface cracked and tarnished, reflecting their ghostly, distorted images. The air was thick with mold and decay, and the temperature seemed to drop with every step. Isaac was drawn to the captain's desk, where a large, leather-bound logbook sat open, its pages yellowed and brittle. "The captain recorded everything," he murmured. "Strange happenings, crew members disappearing, whispering voices in the night, and an overwhelming sense of dread. They believed they were cursed." Sarah shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "Do you think the curse is real?" Before anyone could respond, a deep, resonant sound echoed through the ship. A low, mournful wail, like the call of a lost soul. The crew froze, their breaths hitching as the sound reverberated through the wooden beams. "Did you hear that?" Marcus hissed, his eyes darting around. "Stay calm," Elijah urged, though he could feel his heart pounding. "We need to stick together." As they ventured deeper into the ship, the oppressive atmosphere grew more intense. Shadows seemed to shift and writhe in the corners, and the air grew colder with each step. The walls were damp, covered in a slimy greenish mold that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. They reached the crew quarters, where hammocks still hung from the ceiling, swaying gently as if occupied by invisible figures. The mournful wail had faded, replaced by suffocating silence. Suddenly, Sarah gasped, pointing to the end of the corridor. There, standing in the shadows, was a small figure. It was a young girl, her eyes wide and hollow, her dress tattered and stained with seawater. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her hair hung in wet, tangled strands. "Help us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elijah felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The girl didn't respond. She turned and slowly walked away, disappearing into the darkness. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, then followed her, drawn by a mix of fear and curiosity. Their footsteps echoed in the narrow, winding corridors. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay and something ancient and malevolent. They found themselves in the ship's hold, where the cargo had long since rotted away. The air was thick with the stench of decay. The girl stood by a large, ornate chest, her spectral form flickering like a candle flame. Isaac approached the chest cautiously. "This must be what she wants us to find." He opened the chest, revealing a dark, leather-bound book with arcane symbols etched into its cover. The book pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and the air around it seemed to hum. Elijah felt a wave of dread wash over him as he stared at the book. "What is this?" Isaac carefully lifted the book, his hands trembling as he opened it. The pages were filled with strange symbols and drawings, all written in a language none of them recognized. "This is a grimoire," he said, his voice trembling. "A book of dark magic. The captain must have used it to try and lift the curse." As Isaac flipped through the pages, the ship began to shudder. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, taking on a more sinister form. The girl, who had been standing silently by the chest, suddenly cried out, "Help us! Break the curse!" Elijah knew what had to be done. The book was the key to breaking the curse, but it required a sacrifice. He took the book and began to read aloud, the words strange on his tongue. The ship shuddered, and the air grew thick with the cries of the damned. As Elijah continued the ritual, the ghostly figures of the crew began to materialize. Their faces were gaunt and hollow, their eyes filled with sorrow. The ship groaned under the weight of their despair. Elijah's voice grew stronger as he neared the end of the ritual. The ship shuddered one final time, and the air was filled with a blinding light. The spectral forms of the crew began to fade, their faces filled with relief.